Hi, my name is Shane Rich. I'm the Technical Director here at RBH Sound. Today we're going to be going through the procedure that will help you to integrate a subwoofer into a speaker system. So to begin with, let me introduce some of the products that we'll be featuring in this video. First of all, we have our PM8 studio monitor system, and this not only can be used as a studio monitor in a near field environment, but also as a far field monitor for hi-fi listening. Very versatile speaker system. It's self-powered, active crossover system with DSP. So we'll be using a pair of these for left and right speaker, and we'll be integrating, to begin with, an SV12 subwoofer. The SV12 subwoofer, in this case, is being powered separately by our SA500 DSP amplifier, which we have over here on the stand, and we'll be turning that on in just a few minutes after we pull a measurement or two just of the loudspeakers themselves in this room. So granted, this room, as you can see, we don't have a bunch of seating in it, but this will still give you a great idea of what is needed and necessary to set up a speaker system like this in your own home environment. So in order to do this, we'll be using the Dayton UMM6 microphone, which is available on Parts Express, and it comes in at about $80. That is connected to the PC, which I'm using, that has REW Room EQ Wizard on it, and that's actually a free software application. This is a relatively inexpensive way to demonstrate what you might want to do in your own situation with setting up a speaker system with a subwoofer. So to begin with, we're going to quickly pull just a measurement of the speaker system. We'll be measuring both the left and right loudspeakers at the same time. They will be measured by the Dayton microphone, and it's sitting at approximately where the listening position would be in this room if we had a chair there. Now, if we did have the chair, you'd probably have the microphone on top of the chair at about ear height, so that you're pulling a measurement right where you'd be listening to the speaker system. So we'll start the measurement here. Now what this shows is the response of both the left and right loudspeakers, and a full range from 20 to 20,000 hertz. We're not really going to be utilizing the high frequency information on these measurements, so I will be changing the settings so that we'll focus on probably everything 500 hertz and down once we start integrating the subwoofer. But this at least gives you an idea of what the measurement is in room with the speaker system, and this is in the full range setting. So what I want to do now is I'm going to change to the crossover setting that we have on our PM8, which will roll off the low frequencies below 80 hertz. So we can do that quite simply by changing by the turn of a switch to our 80 hertz filter setting on the speaker. To begin with, let's talk about room acoustics. Just a basic overview. We'll draw a room here, give it some dimensions, say 15 feet wide by 24 feet long, and let's say it has an 8-foot ceiling, which is pretty standard. So we'll just draw that as the height, even though we're talking here with just a two-dimensional drawing. Let's talk about the energy that will be most prominent in this room, the base energy, given the dimensions of the room. So we know we're going to be looking to put a subwoofer somewhere in here. If we just randomly place it, we may come up with a frequency response from the subwoofer in the room that is less than ideal. If we draw in our room here, wavelength, and this energy essentially reverberates or resonates in the room relative to, in this case, the length of the room, the width of the room, or the height of the room, all three of those dimensions. So we'll have three primary room modes. To calculate these modes, let's start with what we call the axial mode, or the mode relative to the length of the room. We can take the speed of sound, divide that by this particular length in the room that corresponds to the length of this mode, and then come up with the frequency that we know we'll see excess resonance. So we'll take 1130 feet per second, just roughly the speed of sound at sea level, divide that by 24 feet, and that gives us a frequency of 47. So 47 hertz, again 1130 divided by 24. So at 47 hertz in this room, we expect to see a resonance in the room. Now, when we talk about room modes, it's important to understand what that really means in terms of how that resonance is going to affect both where our subwoofer is placed and where we are sitting in the room. We may be sitting at this location. We'll just say this is our couch. And as you can see here, we have, we'll just call this our 47 hertz wavelength that we're talking about. And we'll see an increased amount of base energy, or a peak in the response, at this particular location in the room. If we shift our listening position a little bit further back or a little bit forward, we may see a dip or null in the energy, acoustic energy at 47 hertz. This is called a room node, where there is a dip in the response, or an antinode, where there is a peak in the response. So when you hear the term room modes, you have corresponding nodes or positions within the room where you either have a dip or peak in the acoustic energy at that frequency, which we've determined is 47 hertz, again, relative to the length of our room. Now we can go through this exercise and determine also the resonance mode that is relative to the width of 15 feet. If we do that, 1130 divided by 15, we get a frequency of 75 hertz. So we'll have one at 75 hertz, and then we'll also have one at relative to the 8-foot height, 1130, 8 feet divided by 141 hertz. Now, so we'll have some resonance in the room corresponding to these frequencies. We'll also have excess energy in the room that corresponds, or I should say resonance in the room that corresponds to these frequencies divided by 2. So if we divide these by 2, we've got another one at 70 hertz roughly, another one at 35, we'll call it 37 hertz, and another one at, let's say, roughly 23 hertz. So now how do we use this information to help us determine what we might use as initial ideal placement for a subwoofer in the room? I feel the best way to do this initially is to divide the room into thirds, or use what we call the rule of thirds. So we may start with placement, let's say on the front wall we'll divide this into thirds. Of course, we're talking about 5 feet distance. So we'll want to likely start with placement of the subwoofer about 5 feet into the room. So the rationale behind using the rule of thirds is we'll excite less room resonance, or less room modes in general, that does not correspond to the half wavelength, full wavelength, or any portion of the wavelength divisible by 2. So to simplify what we're talking about here, the most ideal location for a subwoofer to begin with may be using this rule of thirds so that we excite fewer room modes. All right, so let's talk about the room that we're currently in at the moment, the subwoofer placement. So the room we have here is 40-foot length and 15-foot width. We originally placed the subwoofer at 5 feet in. We have to be careful because this distance in the room does correspond to 1/8 of the wavelength. So 40 divided by 5 equals 8. So there's possibility we may have some excitation of the room mode of this 40-foot dimension. And so it's possible, we'll give it a try, but we may have to end up corner loading the subwoofer to get, or moving the subwoofer at least closer to the corner to get a little better overall response relative to our listening position. You do not hear bass from the speaker. You hear bass from the room. The room factors in that much into what's happening with your bass response. Yes, you have to have something excite, output the energy all through the spectrum, but what you're seeing is actually bass response of the room, or what you're hearing is the response of bass in the room itself. So let's go take some measurements. The speaker is 5 feet into the room. The room is roughly 15 feet wide, so it's a third of the way in. I have it set up where the default is 80 hertz for the crossover frequency on the subwoofer, and that is, of course, also the crossover frequency on our PM8 main speakers. We'll take a measurement.